So it's going to be an interesting conversation today. I mean, we've grown our team from 3 to 25, and it's one of those things where culture is starting to become a big point of topic, right? And we've made a lot of jokes about this, where we definitely don't want culture to be about a table tennis table or a pool table. So it'll be really interesting to have, I mean, yourself coming in from an international aspect, working with hyper-growth companies overseas. Then having Mikey, who's done amazing stuff at Vinomofo, which is a fast-growing Australian startup. And then David on the other spectrum, where he joined the Grand Prix, which quite a traditional business, but being able to flip that around and having visited them recently, it's completely different. Like it completely blew my mind on the type of culture they have. I mean, what's your thoughts and what are you expecting from today?
Well, culture is something that I'm super passionate about talking about, and I've done a bunch of different conferences around it. So I always just love to get a different perspective. Like a lot of my experiences coming from the US, so seeing a homegrown Australian brand is great. I love Vinomofo's brand and what they're doing, so to see how they're building that culture would be great. And also just looking at how different companies have maybe change their culture, and is that something that people are actually able to do? How do they successfully do that?
Yeah. And I mean, it's really interesting because we've been doing a lot of recruitment as well, and it's been completely new to me. Right? I'll be completely honest, and how much culture affects recruitment has been something really prevalent in all of our recruitment needs. So it's going to be a really interesting conversation, and I think hopefully we can steal some new tricks.
Yeah, I'm excited to really just speak to everyone and probably to discover that even looking at corporates to startups, we're all kind of looking to achieve the same thing. So love to hear how they approach that.
Oh, awesome.
Welcome to the new School of Recruitment. I'm Brooklyn. Nice to meet you.
Look, obviously, thanks for coming in today. And like I said, so this is something where I'm by no means an expert in. I'm actually genuinely really curious to understand this more because we've grown our team substantially, and when you grow through such a short amount of time, it's really hard to go, this is the culture, or it's this organic element, but at the same time we are trying to, as the senior leadership team, trying to go, right, what is the culture that we actually want, and how can we actually influence that, or is it something that's purely organic, etc. So I mean, and this is where, when I speak to certain businesses, people talk about, or even when we're recruiting, we hear it a lot from candidates. I want to join a company with a great culture. I want to, and then when you ask them what that is, they're like, I want the table tennis. I want the cool people. But that's not really culture. Having a pool table or a table tennis table, it doesn't mean that's not the culture. That's just a part of the office decor, right? So I mean, starting ladies first, Marissa, I'd love to hear from you. What does culture mean to you?
I think that's a good point, because to me, culture is more about things that are intangible, things that are related to your own personal values. And so for me, everything needs to be values aligned from the start. And when I think one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of founders make is they fear talking about culture as being this HR thing, and everyone's like, oh, HR, once you get HR into the mix, then it's uncool and it's not fun and we're not a startup anymore. But when you do that, then you wait until too long until you've built this toxic culture, and then you're trying to go back and fix it. So for me, it's not about the ping pong tables. That's something that Tony and I agreed on from the very beginning. And that's something that, coming from Silicon Valley, is you always see that. It's like foosball and ping pong and nap rooms, but those are just perks. They're perks and benefits that companies use to try to make their company seem cool, why you should work for us. When I was at Slack, one of the things that I was saying when we made the career page was let's not focus on perks. Let's really focus on the values and what we're trying to accomplish and speak to that.
Cool. Mikey, yourself?
I totally agree with that. I think that the fundamentals are what creates a great culture, and those values are essential. what you said before about the questions you're asking yourself, what is our culture and how do we build a great culture? I think that's how you do it. You identify what it is you want to experience, what kind of culture you want to have, and figure it out as you go by asking the right questions. I don't think there's a formula that you can translate from one company to another. Yeah. What's working for us is different to what's working for you and for you. Yeah. And so I think there are some fundamentals which are key, i.e. values, being really clear about what they are and ensuring that people know what they are through how you do what you do. I think these are the fundamentals that will translate to and result in a great culture, which might involve dogs and in the office and ping pong tables. But it doesn't start with that. Correct. You've got to build the foundation first. Correct. So I think it's not sexy and cool to talk about values, but it's essential if you actually want to build a culture that is sustainable. Yeah. Yeah, interesting. I'm going to come back with some more extra questions, but David, yourself, I mean, I know we chatted at length the last time, but I'd love to, hear it again.
Yeah, no, 100%. Well, I mean, I agree with everything that's been said. I think that it's about a collective experience, and that's a very wide thing, what that collective experience looks like. It's about a combination of, what sort of industry you're in, what it is that you're trying to achieve, why have culture? It's about performance. So what are you trying to perform? What are you trying to achieve as an organisation? And then you've got that combination of what is it that your staff want? What are people vibing with at a particular time that helps them with their performance as well? So you've got the combination of where you would like to take the business as a business owner, where do I want to take Weploy? But at the same time, you've got what people would be saying to you, let's make these changes to the work environment or change up our focus on these values or, we do need, more perks and benefits because we're too serious or, it's too much about fun and I can't concentrate. So, to me, it's always different from company to company but it's always defined by an agreed collective experience of what, so that regardless of people's backgrounds and regardless of what's most important to each person individually, they can sort of define it. They can define that collective experience of saying this is what it feels like to work in this company. And if you can get so many different people from different walks of life with that sort of uniformity in their vision, this is what it feels like. I think that's where you start to establish a solid culture, something that people get and understand.
So, I mean, you mentioned right now quite a few times, it's something that you feel, right? But is culture something you feel, or is it something that you can define? This is where, as a founder, where I've been thrown into this deep end. I have no theoretical studies or backgrounds around this. Is it something that you just wait for people to feel and go, this is our culture, or is it something that you go, guys, this is the culture we want to build? I mean.
I think it happens. Culture's going to happen. You've got a culture. Yeah. Whether it's the one you want is the question. Yeah. So you don't sort of build culture. Yes, you can build culture, and you should should design the kind of culture you want. The fact is that there is a culture, and that's the outcome. What people feel and experience is the outcome of processes, systems, experiences that you ideally consciously create with that outcome in mind. Yeah. So working back from the culture that you have, and it's an interpretation. So everybody here is going to experience the culture in their own way. Ideally, it'd be a relatively sort of similar experience, one that aligns with what you're trying to create. But the fact is, everyone's going to experience and feel it differently. Yeah. If it's within that collective, ideally, you want it to be, a similar experience, and so that's when the sort of design over sort of default comes into it, and you go, okay, so if this is what people are collectively experiencing, is it what we want them to experience? Is it working? Yep. And if not, then go back and figure out what experiences are necessary to curate in order for this culture to be felt.
And when you say experiences, what do you mean by that?
I think there's a lot of things that happen and can happen quite deliberately that people probably wouldn't normally think about.
Yeah, sure.
Or acknowledge. So communication, not just that you communicate, but the tone, the frequency, the consistency, the language. I mean, I met with Andre, our CEO, this morning, talking about how he communicates at our town hall meetings.
Sure.
Because his intention was not always being received in the way in which, ideally it was to be received. So it's like, cool, how do we tweak that?
Right.
What are some of the ways in which you can, some of the different words you can use to help connect? And so nobody would notice that. Nobody would know, like during that town hall in a couple of weeks, nobody's going to know that we sort of strategized this and dropped in some key words to help the team understand what it is that he's really trying to communicate. So things like that, just being really clear about the rituals, the routines, the processes, and having consistency across those to enable there to be a consistent sort of feeling or experience that people have.
Yeah.
So a lot of what happens quite normally and naturally can be constructed or sort of manipulated in a way to achieve a slightly different experience if it's not one that if it's not happening the way in which you want it to.
And that ties back, Tony, to why you're doing it. What's the core purpose? So the core purpose comes back to the business purpose. So how do you know that the collective experience is either working, not working, or in the direction you want it to be? Well, if your results are extremely poor, if the company's struggling, if people are disengaged, if they're not communicating or they're not producing their KPIs, their KRAs, and you can just get a sense that there is a bit of lethargy within the organisation. Usually that's where the tweaks, come from. It's, that's where sometimes you can say, well, maybe we're symbolically putting a lot of effort in to create a strong culture, but it's just not working because people aren't working.
Yeah. So is your measurement of a good culture or a bad culture directly looking at how the people are performing, or is there other ways to measure that culture element?
Well, we measure people's experience.
Yeah.
So we measure at the same time, how people are feeling, and against a whole raft of different metrics, and you put that in combination with how the organisation's performing. So obviously you can get situations, and there's been in human history where it's gone, you can create a dictatorship, you can get results for a period of time, and it can go catastrophically wrong, where, superficially it looks good, for your investors, but underneath it, you've got, potential industrial problems and people not getting on, and usually you get found out. You might have short-term results, but eventually, your reputation can head south pretty quickly. But, the counter side to that is usually you have a correlation that, you might not be exactly where you want to be results-wise as a business, but you usually can see a correlation when people are feeling pretty good, and they're communicating to you saying, yeah, it's a pretty good place to work. I feel that I've got good flexibility. It's modern, good communication. You should start to also see the correlation that people are happy to stick around. They're happy to work.
Sure.
Sick leave is not as potentially high as it can be. So to me, it's usually the combination of both looking at talking to people at the same time as also keeping one eye on, why you open the doors in the first place.
Yeah. So it was really exciting to have the three of you here, and the reason why is collectively you share a lot of wealth and wisdom, but in very different areas. But also at sometimes there's quite a interlacing situation where having overseas experience, both of yourself worked in hyper growth startups, and joining at that point where it went from this to enormous, and then yourself being able to go into essentially quite a traditional type business. And when we met up and went inside, that was not a traditional business. That was from the outset, that's not what I expected, and quite a transformation has happened. So I'd love to understand, from maybe first from Marissa and Mikey, you both joined hypergrowth startups at an early stage. They've all been successful. You know, it's Facebook, Skype, Slack, and Vinomofo. How have you seen culture play a part of that? Because I think a lot of times when people say like their success, they don't necessarily always talk about culture. They say we had a great sales team, we had a great execution, or great marketing, or great tech, but rarely do we ever talk about it was great culture. You know, did you see the success quite directly correlated to culture?
Yeah, I think culture can play a really, really good part of being able to scale successfully, because it really does come down to the people. And when you think about, well, do I want, like maybe 10 kind of B-level performers or 5 really strong A-level players? So it kind of goes back to that team mentality and how people can really kind of roll up their sleeves and kind of get dirty. And we talk about tenacity and grit at Weploy a lot. Like that's something we look for, and I think is super important in that startup stage. Maybe not so much once you're accomplished, but I think that's one of the key factors I've seen in some of the good startups that I've worked for is people are just very aligned with kind of the end strategic goal and how we're going to get there. And there's no hierarchy of titles and responsibilities. It's literally we're kind of all the same.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, I think it's essential. You've got to have a great product first. Can't have a great culture and a shitty product. Otherwise, your business is going to fail. So you need a good business model, a good product to sell, or a platform in which that sort of all takes place. Culture for Vinomofo has been the differentiating factor in our success, and I think that. That was defined really early. Okay. 2 co-founders who are really clear about how we wanted to operate as a business, what we stood for, and what kind of how we wanted to work. And that was very much an extension of their own personal sort of personalities and how they wanted to not only run business or run a business, but also how they wanted to work with people that in that business and also businesses we work with. So the challenge then was taking what was sort of implicitly known and experienced through sort of osmosis by working in a very small team, and as the company grew, then to go, well, okay, what was it? What's the essence of that culture, that kind of we all love and our customers loved, that we need to sort of try and protect and nurture as we scale. And that's when it became really important to identify, well, what is it? And then how do we look after it?
Was there any time, and it could be either a positive or a negative experience, where during that growth you saw culture really play a part? Like, for example, I don't know, there was a time where you guys hit rough times, and through tenacity and grit you were able to build together. Like, did you see something even in your times where culture really stood out? And if culture didn't exist, the business wouldn't be here today.
Yeah, totally. Every day there's examples of that.
Yeah, startup world is a bit like this.
I was working sort of as a contractor remotely in the first year. So I wasn't there, in the garage, in the warehouse in the early days. But I see it on the weekends now. I came to pick up something from the office on Saturday, and Michelle was in there just watering some plants and taking care of business on a Saturday, because during the week, it wasn't practical for her to do that. There's examples like that on a daily basis, right. But there's also been examples too when the company we've kind of felt like we're just off track, and there's been a need to stop and go, okay, what's going on? Why is this happening? And then going back to the essence, those core values, and going, all right, is this in alignment with what it is that we value and we say we're doing? And the chances are, if things aren't going so well, then no, and then it's just bringing it back onto track.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And how about yourself? You joined a business that was quite traditional. It's been around for quite a number of years, and you've gone through quite a cultural transformation. How has that helped your business, or how has that really impacted, or has it impacted the business?
Yeah, I think just over the last number of years, in a couple of different industries and jobs, I've stepped into where things have gone wrong, or that and not necessarily results-wise, but certainly culturally, there's been a series of problems. And I suppose one of the easiest challenges is when you come into an organisation and things aren't in place, things that you would necessarily sort of take for granted. Walking through the door of this company here, the first year or two is really about re-engaging with people. Just putting all of the foundations in place, establishing social and culture committees, and re-establishing things like honour boards and better reward and recognition, and just all the things that you guys would have started with. And I've just seen it through the lens of what happens when a business is built without that in place, and it's left organically to chance. And every business is always in a government setting, and now with Grand Prix, it's you see it's filled with brilliant people. There's really good aspects of it. It's not a black and white thing. Just because culture starts to get away from a company doesn't mean that everybody's broken, but it's just left to chance. It's sort of like that floating, bobbing thing in the ocean where, when bad things happen, you probably don't have that protection of resilience, and that's where relationships can become fragmented, and people can become a bit confused about what's expected of them, and people sort of then start to make up their own rules in terms of saying, well, this is how I perceive what's important. So I think sort of coming into the business, it's always been about sort of trying to engage emerging leaders and putting things in place and creating some momentum from a business that's already pre-existing and been around either for 100 years or 40 years or 22 years. And I think the biggest challenge for me is always trying to get through those first few stages, which is about building, but it's about finding that long-term sustainability where, 6 or 7 years into a program, and that program's evolved, where a business can ride out almost any challenge, where you could lose your CEO, you could lose a number of executive team members, your financial performance might really dip, but your culture keeps people really tight and really able to sort of, bed down and work their way through challenges. I don't think I've ever sort of worked in an organisation that's really gone all the way through, from beginning to end. It's always evolving and tinkering, and I suppose that's the goal for me, is to sort of get to the other end where you really can ride out pretty much any challenge, because those cultural norms are just so strong.
But you've got a really interesting. You came in at a really interesting time, right? Like in our business, we brought people over from the corporate world, and we go through this thing where we almost like we have to decorporatize them over 3 months, and basically we unculture them and then bring them into our culture, right? But it's easy when you've got a whole team kind of driving that same. You're starting from fresh. You've stepped into a situation where you've got legacy. You've got all these years of culture that's been ingrained into this staff there, and then you're getting them to flip it around and turn around and change. Marissa, you talked about how like it starts with HR, and we had this great conversation where HR should be like human people, right? But a lot of times in businesses, HR are the ones that are dear HR. No one wants to talk to HR. They're not the one that's connected. They're not the ones that's socializing. But that's HR is the center or the heart of the business. So in your case, how do you go in to a traditional business and change their mentality and de-learn all that years of culture into this really positive change?
Well, I think one of the things is I try to be very non-traditional to start with. So I try to sort of break down some of those norms that people might have experienced with HR, and I think it's about very much being about rolling the sleeves up and engaging with people, and really trying to promote sort of vulnerability and authenticity, which comes very naturally from the States and from Silicon Valley. It's really promoted that people bring their own personality, and for me, it's always been around starting with that. It's about having conversations with people, not looking for out-of-the-box solutions, and really exposing my frailties and just trying to sort of create some momentum by asking people, are you happy? And if the answer is no, it's saying, well, I'm prepared to sort of work with you guys to try and try and take the experience of working here and really try to improve it. But yeah, it's not something you might be able to get a lot of the totems improved quickly. But it takes time to build trust with people.
It's super easy to write a post-it note and put it on the wall and go, "This is our new thing," right? But was there a period where you had to like almost get the senior leadership buy-in? Because sometimes they're like, well, sometimes senior leaders don't care about that. They're just kind of like, culture's culture. The guys are selling, so let them keep selling or whatever. How'd you bring them onto the journey?
I think the first thing I said is my goal is to make myself redundant. So, to make HR not really that important as part of the process. So the first goal with the organisation was saying I want to just help empower other people, because there's better people than myself that work there. That's in every organisation. So it was really, as I said, just saying, you've got talented artists and DJs and people that potentially had two different personas, the corporate side and then the personal side that they were protecting. So, mine was about sort of really trying to say, hey, I need help, who's in, and starting to sort of just expose some of the talent within the business. And we started with, literally, we called it the line in the sand. So we got some sand into the office and we got the CEO who sort of was very vulnerable and said, look, I'm responsible for the fact that this is sort of not where we want it to be. And he drew a line in the sand and said, who wants to be part of it with me? And I will say, there was people that just like every group of people, that you have your cynics. You had a number of people that left that just said, I don't have the energy for it, and I'm this is my signal that it's time to go. And
it's good. You need to refresh every now and then.
And you had a number of staff and leaders that were just sort of saying, I'm happy to sort of get involved. And over the year or two, I'd say at the beginning it was myself and my HR team that were much more involved. And then over a sort of a 2 or 3 year period, you gradually start to get people, the artists, designing new walls and
You've got the rock thing.
Displays and the DJ running parties and then all of a sudden it's really not to do with HR anymore. It starts to develop its own momentum and life. You've got a social and culture committee that meet with the CEO and now meeting with the board. And 3 years ago that had never happened. So to me, it's sort of you sort of just get involved in the beginning. But if you can't get people interested, you're just not going to be successful, because otherwise you're just rolling out packaged goods. You know.
So this show, I mean, we created this show, the New School of Recruitment, because we wanted to talk about what the future of work looks like and how does tech play into that. And we've talked about things like finding your purpose. We've talked about employer branding, and today we're talking about culture, right? So from a recruitment perspective and a technology point, how do you see culture fitting into how it betters your recruitment, and how does it, and do you see any technology plays happening in this space?
I think definitely culture is something that I think about in the recruitment process. So even having a focus on one of the interviews being purely culture fit, and how are they aligning to the company values? Are their personal values in line with the way we express ourselves at work and the way we go about doing things? There's a lot of great HR tech coming out now. It's kind of a hot space right now, which is interesting to see. It's gone from like the unsexy, uncool thing to being hip. But there's a lot of different softwares now that can actually, you can take kind of a quiz and see, what are your strong points, what are your weak points, and not necessarily like if you're a fit for the company, but how do you align with the people that currently work there? And that can give both the employer and the candidate good insight into whether they feel like it's a good environment where they would really thrive.
And I know obviously when we do our vetting or our interviewing, even from how I used to interview before you'd come along, was very kind of like a 1 to 2 kind of, oh, maybe I need to do another round with this person or not. And then when Marissa came in, it was very much like, no, we need to do these separate rounds and one specifically just around culture. And then we introduced Greenhouse to obviously start standardizing and understanding how to track our values better so that we could look at that. I mean, you occasionally hire temps, right, in your business?
A lot, because I suppose with the Formula One and MotoGP, we're quite a small organisation, so we'd be not a lot bigger than your company, and then we have to grow exponentially large for a short period of time. So there is a lot of temporary employees, and I suppose also you have those pressure points where, because we're relatively small and the scale is so big, an international event for a finite period of time, is that we just wouldn't be nimble enough to be able to get the job done.
Sure.
So if there's a particular new entertainment or an overseas act coming, or they're changing the scope of offering, if it's an FMX display, or we're working with universities, sometimes we just might not have the skills or the experience within the organisation to nimbly address it to the standard that's required. Right. So, I suppose you end up with a lot of repeat business of people that have sort of been in and around the business and come back. They work the tennis and they work overseas, and they go to Wimbledon and they come back to Australia. But at the same time, I think it's definitely something that the culture aspect which you just raised. I think in the past we were a bit laissez-faire about. It's like, just get somebody, get the CV. They're only working 4 or 5 days. What's the worst that can happen?
Sure.
And I think we're just starting to have a bit more consciousness about it, because, we've seen the benefit of, when you get it right, when you click with a really, mature team that communicates well, they understand what's expected of them, they've got good experience or a good attitude, just how smoother an event goes. I think in the past, you sometimes take it for granted, saying, oh, well, stuff's going to happen. Something might go badly wrong. Someone might just leave on the second day and just say, this isn't for me. And we kind of just thought, well, the circus comes to town and bad things happen, and we just got to deal with it. And I think we started to realise that if we can get short-term employees that are really good cultural fits, not only can we use them again and they become part of that family, but at the same time, our results are just so much better. And I can say maybe at the last MotoGP event, we really started to see that continuity of saying, we were just a bit more conscious across our hiring managers. It had nothing to do with HR really, but our hiring managers were a bit more conscious of just saying, okay, what do I need, and where have I gone wrong in the past? When things go wrong, when people become confused, when people say, Jesus, this is too big for me.
So in those short periods, are you looking for people that are more adaptable then? Because, some people that are really outspoken about a specific culture may not be right? In that period, are you looking for more, essentially, people who can come in, absorb to your culture quickly and be able to take it on and embrace it quickly?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's, sometimes it's a person it's their first job. We dealt with people that are, English is not their first language, and it's just attitudinal based, just like any other thing. They have just a really, adaptable attitude. They're just like, yep, I'm up for anything, and they've got a great, strong work ethic. And then you've got other examples where, you tangibly say, right, this is where this team goes wrong, that we pick too many inexperienced people and we're asking too much of them. And, we had teams where you had 4 or 5 people that had brilliant experience, overseas, global experience. They'd worked in the States, they'd worked elsewhere, and they're just self-starters and they just get on with it. They're just completely low maintenance, or they can take other young staff and they can exhibit leadership even if they're on a 2-day contract. And they can say, right, Tony, come with me. Don't worry about it. I'll sort you out. And I think that we're only just starting to sort of play with that idea. We certainly haven't got anywhere near sort of being able to codify it. But we do know that bringing culture into short-term employment is a new wave that we have to start to get a better understanding for, and technology might be one way of doing it.
Just to add onto that, perhaps even from a customer or a consumer's perspective, whether it's sort of short-term temp staff, I think it's really important to help them understand why it is that, or how we do things. around here. And we employ hospitality staff to come and serve drinks whenever we have end of month drinks, because it's just something that we don't want to have the responsibility of doing, and so therefore we employ someone to do it. And whenever they arrive, I say, so this is us. This is how we sort of do this. These are our expectations of you. You can unbutton your top shirt. Don't need the bow tie. That's not how we roll here. Just want to make sure everyone's going to do this, that, and the other. And this is how we do it. And then they're like, oh, cool, thank you, because for us, they are now an employee and a representative of the company. That's not sort of public or customer facing. But if I was to come to an event at a big function and be speaking with a wait staff, as far as I'm concerned, they're employed by the company. And so they're a representative of you. And I think to enable them just to understand a few key sort of go-tos with regards to, the experience you want them to translate or enable or help others have, I think really helps everyone. Yeah. And ideally you'd have a bit of consistency. So it's just, it's taking a culture strategy and just applying it in a really sort of micro, short-term kind of fashion.
Now, our amazing producer keeps giving me the stink eye because we're running over time. So we're going to have to wrap it up. But I think, obviously, thanks for today. Thanks for coming in. That was really good. I think there's a lot. I think we could be talking about this for a long time. But I think it's really exciting and it's really important because, like I said before, I've been in businesses where culture has been terrible. And, I've left quickly, or you've seen this massive churn. And then there's these businesses I've been in where when I'm sick at home, I'm like, oh man, I want to go to work today. I mean, Marissa mentioned it quite a bit back at Slack, where people used to feel left out when they weren't coming into the office. And it's a massive differential. We spend so much time at work. But anyways, thanks for tuning in to this week's episodes. Tune in to next time on the new School of Recruitment show.